our youth, and of course, people from all sections of the society. They were successful to remove this fascist regime with the huge sacrifice. So now we are exposed to a new situation. Now we are at a stage which brings in a lot of opportunity, new light of hope, and but also with a lot of challenges as well. So with that note, I would like to stop at this point that we are now at a stage of a new beginning. So how to move with this new beginning? I would love to hear from other speakers as well, and also I would be very honored to listen from our very esteemed speaker, Dr. Abdul Moyeen Khan too. So please, over to you.
Okay, let us move on now to the current situation. As I was saying earlier, as I mentioned earlier, I think Bangladesh has crossed a phase in its process to transition to democracy from autocracy in 2024. What we have achieved is only the phase one. And there are two more important phases which we have to cross so that we can restore the democratic process in Bangladesh. Let me try to give a brief elaboration on those two future phases. Firstly, the interim government has been set up and they're talking about reforms which are important and also necessary. But as far as reforms are concerned, let me make it clear that reform is a continuous process. Reforms are not something that we do today and then sit down on them for the next 10 or 20 years. No, reform doesn't happen that way. As the society transforms, as the system transforms, the reforms are needed to be carried out in a continuous manner. What is being reformed today will need to be again re-reformed in the future. So we believe that while the government must concentrate on the necessary reforms at this point in time in order to transit into the democratic system, they must also bear in mind that this process cannot take an endless time. We are at the moment being a major political party in Bangladesh. We are concerned that the system does not dissipate into something where people become impatient and we end up in another unstable state. That is a concern of the people, and that is also our concern. And as you pointed out, our eventual target, the third phase, would be to restore the parliament. Because parliament is the place where the representatives of the 180 million people of Bangladesh would be entrusted to speak out on behalf of the people, not necessarily on behalf of the members of the parliament. So this is important. While I agree that the member of parliament would also have their own view, but the basic concept of a parliament is to represent the mass population of the country. So with those views in mind, as I said, the second step, the reforms, the necessary reforms, that is the step 2, and third step is a free and fair election by way of which we'll restore the parliament. And as you had emphasized the issue of the parliament, and I fully agree with you, the parliament must be formulated in such a way that they represent the views of the people. That is my concern. all of you are aware, fully aware, that Bangladesh follows the democratic pattern of the Westminster that was set up in England. So, while we believe in the process of the parliament, in the model of the Westminster, we must bear in mind that this is a parliament which is formulated on the concept of one man, one vote. We do not, in Bangladesh, we do not follow, or we have not yet followed the concept of an election which is based on the basis of percentage of votes. No, we are conducting our election on the concepts of individual constituencies. And whichever person within that constituency gets the majority of the vote is elected to the parliament to represent the people of that particular constituency. So we must bear in mind those basic fundamentals when we talk about the parliament. A proportionate system of parliament is practiced uh, a lot in Europe, we are aware, but as far as I know, to the best of my knowledge, in North America, neither US nor Canada practices uh, that system. So, when we form the parliament, as I say, the basic uh, condition, the precondition is to hold a free and fair election so that the people can truly express their mind. And after that, the parliament would come, and then the question would arise how this parliament is going to frame what is called the rules of procedure, which is the basic law by which a parliament is conducted. So, if I understand you correct, when you talk about the parliament's functioning and responsibilities, I think one needs to concentrate on these rules of procedure. And we try to follow the rules of procedures once these rules of procedures are agreed upon within the parliament. Associated is the other question. I'll finish soon. Associated with this concept of rules of procedure, there is the fundamental question of the constitution of a country. While we talk about constitution, it is generally agreed that the constitution has got two basic components. One are the fundamental concepts which are laid out in the parliament within the constitution, and there are other parts of the constitution which comprises of laws, details of things, and the procedural matters. Now, when we talk about the fundamental concepts of the constitution, it is also generally agreed upon that if you need to change or if you need to amend those fundamental concepts, you must go back to the people once again. Or, in other words, if you want to amend those fundamental concepts, you must have a referendum within the country so that the people can give their views on the basis of which the constitution can be reformulated. As you must be aware, in Bangladesh, there is also at the moment a debate going on as to whether we are going to amend the previous constitution or we are going to totally reformulate a new constitution. My personal belief that this question must be resolved by the people of Bangladesh, and for which one needs a referendum and one may need a constituent assembly. An interim government is morally not in a position to bring about fundamental changes in our constitution. So that is what basic things I presented to you, and other speakers can take up on these and additional points relating to the parliament. There are further more details, hundreds of details about the parliament, how it will function, and as I say, how to conduct the debates, how to conduct the question hours, how to formulate the law, how to restrict the voting pattern of the individual party members within the parliament. These are all matters of huge details, and I don't believe we can discuss all these things in one session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lippert, once again. And of course, again, I appreciate once again our esteemed colleague, Dr. Abdul Moyeen Khan. That's been wonderful to listen to you. Uh, well, I mean, just let me start with some points for a point of. I would say that uh, I'll take that opportunity to take a departure from some of the points what Dr. Khan made. I mean, if you may allow. Uh, First, of course, we have the consensus that we want to restore democracy. I mean, if you look at the aspiration of the people who joined in this 2024 uprise, everybody was, I mean, they were looking for justice. If you look at the graffiti portrayed on the wall of the cities across Bangladesh, what you see that we need democracy, we want justice, and at the same time, you would also see that there are many, many graffitis who that talked about that we want reform. That means reform has been an essential agenda for this July uprise, particularly. And that makes sense. That makes perfect sense because because the democracy, the very kind of ornamental democracy what we had earlier, we are sure that that didn't work. And we have seen that that didn't work, and eventually that democracy turned to a sort of parliamentary autocracy. We saw it in 1996, we saw it in 1991, of course, and of course we have seen the same in 2001 and 2008. So the experience what we have with this earlier version of electoral democracy is not that what we are happy with. This new generation of the people, they are not happy with. They want a real meaningful democracy. And for meaningful democracy, you need reform. And they clearly said it. If you can read the minds of the people, like if you move around the town and you see all these graffitis, they talked about reforms. So reform came at this stage in Bangladesh that is a sort of precondition for democratic transition. So in order to have a inclusive legislature, you want to have we need to have a inclusive, open, and competitive election to be held. And for a competitive, fair, inclusive election to be held, you need to create a very open environment. And but unfortunately, this electoral environment is sort of corrupt with the muscle men, with the moneyed men, and with other and with the sort of a dominance of political parties that a regular party man, a dedicated party man cannot win nomination from their own political party. So at the very beginning, we have some problem in the nomination process. And once you have got a parliament with that election, then you have got a parliament where opposition and the people from the same party cannot talk. Like there is a sort of a winners take all sort of parliament, and the parliament is restricted where no dissent voice can be raised. So what to do with this parliament? What to do with this election? So before we get into an election that really makes sense, that really represent the voice of the people, you need to reform the electoral process for sure. And if we want a parliament, a legislature that work, that really represent the voices of the people across the country, which we have been dreaming for, and Dr. Khan has rightly pointed out that that's kind of a space what we need for our democracy, for our political space. But then again, all these things you need to create a lot of changes, and for the changes you need to bring the changes in the constitution. So without having changes in the constitution, how could you really get to the point what we really dream for what these young people, the hundreds of people from all sections of the society, they sacrifice their life? It's not again. I mean, the people will not be happy with the again to hold an election, sort of a ritual of election, sort of an kind of a facade of democracy like a parliament. We need a meaningful election. We need a legislature that really talks. And I really don't see that if we cannot bring in adequate reforms, what already Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP, has promised in their 31 like kind of a commitment. So they need to do that.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to Thanks to Moyeen Khan Memorial team for giving me join here. Please, I am really delighted to meet you all, our dears. Uh, uh, I like to talk about this on, some parts that we have missed, some parts, then my personal opinion, then immature system. We are living in immature system in governing body. And number two, I feel like improper educational system and amateur thinking level. I would like to talk about our freedom of expression. That means media. Our media are play their role very much partial, not properly. They they can role play for developing our systems to follow the good governance, but they didn't. They somewhere they are biased uh, from political party or ruling party, or they they sometimes rolling following the power money, or disappointed some wrongdoing they are involved here, but we are hopeful to improve these from this kind of discussion, or mobilization and training, and uh, by the seminars here.
But to this point, very quickly, of course, one of the signal problems we had had with the last Awami League government was their steady deterioration of the free media environment. Now, it's interesting to note, and I think important to note, that it didn't start off that way. So if you look at 2009, when they first came into power, and when their first term in office was relatively free as far as media expression was concerned. I remember I launched the Dhaka Tribune in 2013, and I remember even in 2013 we were able to be very open, very free. But as time went on, that space shrank, and my suspicion is that following the 2014 election, when they, you see, when you have a democratic mandate, which they had in 2009, you have a greater degree of confidence in yourself and then your ability to take on criticism. When you don't have a democratic mandate, which is, of course, what the Awami League government failed to have from 2014 onwards, then you're acutely conscious of the fact that you don't have that mandate, whatever you might say in public, and then that makes you enormously sensitive to criticism. It makes you very sensitive to critiques, and you're always trying to shore up your position and stifle dissent. And of course, that then lasted for 10 years. And each year, from 2014 through to 2024, we saw this space shrinking. And it really picked up after 2018. In the last 5 years of this last outgoing government were probably the worst in terms of media freedom in independent Bangladesh. I'm tempted to say it was probably worse than during the Pakistan era, and possibly worse than during the British era going back a couple of hundred years. I mean, I don't think we have ever really faced that kind of a media environment. It was really very, very difficult. The digital media Digital Security Act was passed in 2018 October. It then became the Cyber Security Act, which was not really any improvement, and it has been extraordinarily difficult. Now, so we're very hopeful that whoever comes to power following an election, and I think the the public pronouncements have been made by the other political parties have been very gratifying, have been very heartening, is that they will really put free media and freedom of expression at the center of the reforms or the new Bangladesh which we're trying to build. I have to say that right now, in terms of the interim government, it's been a little bit uneven, because while the interim government has been very supportive of the media, and we have no grievances or no complaints with respect to how they have treated the media, there are one or two problems. One thing is that, for instance, there have been certain media personalities have been arrested on trumped up charges, including my own diplomatic correspondence. So um, so it's not ideal. And of course, some of the pronouncements being made where they say they will prosecute media for who have been guilty of instigation of the atrocities of July and August. Well and good, but how do you define instigation? And beyond the official pronouncements of the government, you have the student leaders, not the ones in the government, but who are still very influential outside of the government, and who have made a lot of statements about that, putting pressure on certain media outlets and showing that they really don't have a great deal of tolerance for dissenting voices or critical voices. So that's something to sort of bear in mind in this particular moment in time we find ourselves. I do feel that once we have an elected government in place, then that gives you more stability and that gives you more sort of accountability. Then you really have to deal with the elected government. I think right now, one of the, I wouldn't say a problem, but it's a reality of the current situation, is that you do have people who are not part of the government who nevertheless are very influential in terms of the policy which the government is making. And we've seen that in terms of a lot of pressure which has been placed for this issue and that issue. You see a lot of street demonstrations, which is probably not the ideal way we want decisions being made. But I'm operating under the assumption that this is a temporary situation, and it's, sooner rather than later. I actually, my personal belief is that that elections will probably happen, perhaps, if not by the end of next year, very shortly thereafter. I don't see, initially there was talk of elections maybe, having the interim period of 3 years to 6 years, but I really don't see that there's much appetite for that. My sense is that it's going to be much sooner than that. And I think that's probably a good thing as far as most people in Bangladesh are concerned. And then the hope is that when we have a newly elected government in place, that free media and freedom of expression is going to be central to the reforms that they promise and that they implement. So I'll leave it there for now, and I'm happy to come in later. Though I do have to also say that I'll be going in and out because, as I said, I have other things I'm trying to take care of as well. So you'll have to forgive me for this.
Thank you. I was trying to listen to the speakers very carefully, so I turned off my microphone. Okay. Firstly, I'd like to thank Owen, and in particular, I enjoyed listening to Mr. Jafar Saban, who rightly pointed out and gave the direction of where this interim government could go. I'd just like to add one line in addition to what Mr. Saban said. I am shocked and surprised why this interim government has not been able to throw away the act, DSA, the Digital Security Act. Why have they not been able to throw this away, although more than 2 months have passed since this government was installed? And when you talk about media, the freedom of media and the freedom of the press and the freedom of the people to speak out their mind, this is fundamental to any democracy. I don't believe anybody can dispute it. So, well, the people of the country at large and the media people within Bangladesh and outside Bangladesh had been speaking about this Digital Security Act for years and years on. Why this government has not taken any action on that? That's one of my questions, and I just like to add this to what Mr. Subhan said. Having said that, let me also come back to what Mr. Islam had said. You see, Mr. Islam has rightly pointed out many of the ills of the democracy. May I add one line? It is generally agreed, and there is an English sentence like this: democracy is bad, but all other systems are worse. If you see what I mean. So while everybody knows that democracy is not a perfect system, we cannot achieve everything in the world to democracy. But each and every other state system that has been tried in the modern age, they have all been considered far, far worse than the democratic system. Number two, Mr. Islam, while rightly pointing out many of the ills of the previous system, I think he has, if I may use this word, he has been misplaced at least in one regard. He said that the present revolution is against the ills of democracy. No, I beg to differ with him. The present revolution of the students of the people is against the autocracy perpetuated by a particular political party in Bangladesh during the last 15 years. That is what this revolution is about. There has been previous revolution. There had been a student revolution in 1952. There had been a student revolution in 1962. There had been a student revolution in 1969. And there had been a student revolution in 1990. Each and every time, this revolution was for the cause of democracy. So the interpretation given by Mr. Islam that the students and the people revolted in 2024 was against and to correct the ills of democracy, that is a misplaced statement. The people and the students of Bangladesh, they revolted against the fascist regime that was perpetuated in Bangladesh in the previous 15 years, specifically speaking. So, while we need to reform, and I agree with some of the speakers, while we're speaking of reforms, we must go for reforms. I'm not saying we are against the reforms, but what I emphasize, reforms, election, everything must go parallel. We cannot make it one after the another or one against the other. They are all component to good governance. That's how I believe. So reforms will go on, and the preparation for the election and a free and fair election, that must go on. And like to re-emphasize, a non-representative government, we all know why this present government is here in Bangladesh. If somebody tries to justify this government by the legal aspects, they will not be able to justify. This is not a legal government. We all know that, and we do not question that, because that question would be totally irrelevant in the present context. But we know that this government is here, and that is the de facto government, and that is the doctrine of necessity. So the government must also make it clear within themselves. They must make it clear that they're here for a specific job. They're not here to remove all the ills of the world. That is not their assignment. Their assignment is to carry on the necessary reforms towards a free and fair election. That is the objective. And this government, the sooner this government do it, they can do it, it's the better.